No one believed a child could outthink the brightest minds of MIT, and yet, in the dead of night, a 13-year-old girl solved equations that had stumped the world's most educated men for weeks. What she did next would shock a city and threaten everything society believed about race, gender, and genius. The letter arrived at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology on a frostbitten morning in January 1897. It was written in the trembling hand of Thomas Ricks, a mill foreman who had never claimed to be a literary man. He apologized 3 times for his poor penmanship before reaching the point. He described a young girl, dark-skinned, small, standing alone in an empty laboratory at 2 a.m, her fingers dusted with chalk, her eyes wide with a strange intensity. On the blackboard before her were 17 steps of advanced calculus and theoretical mechanics, problems that had puzzled graduate students and professors alike. She had not copied, she had not stumbled, she had solved them. Ricks had been patrolling the institute as part of his nightly duties when he saw her. Tears streaked down her cheeks. When he asked what she was doing, she whispered, "I'm sorry, sir. I just needed to fix it. The mathematics was wrong, and it hurt my head to see it broken like that." Professor Harrison Webb, head of MIT's Applied Mathematics Department, received hundreds of letters every year claiming miraculous discoveries. He burned most of them unread, but something about this one made him pause. Perhaps it was the foreman's discomfort, or the precision of the equations, or the simple impossibility of the claim. Webb checked the attached proof himself. Then he consulted 2 colleagues. Every line, every calculation, every step was correct. Not just correct, but elegant. The solution revealed a mind that saw numbers as more than symbols. It saw them as shapes, as structures, as forces interacting in space. It was the kind of intuition that professors searched decades for and rarely found. And it came from Lydia Johnson, the daughter of a colored cleaning woman living in Boston's South End. The South End in 1897 was a place the city wanted to hide. Narrow streets, tenements crammed with families of freed slaves and immigrants, poverty so thick it clung to the walls. The Johnsons lived in a 4-story brick building with peeling paint and broken shutters, a place where sunlight rarely touched the floor. Lydia's mother, Claraara, worked long nights cleaning classrooms at MIT, and Lydia often accompanied her, roaming quietly while her mother worked. Webb arrived at their room, aware of the social risk. A white professor, unaccompanied, knocking on the door of a colored family. He knew this could cause scandal. The door opened to Claraara, her face a mixture of fear and resignation. "Ma'am, I'm Professor Harrison Webb. I'm looking for your daughter." Claraara stiffened. "Miss Lydia, what has she done?" "She did nothing wrong," Webb assured her. "She did something extraordinary." Inside, Lydia sat at a small table, a piece of newspaper in her hands, margins filled with tiny mathematical notations. Her dark eyes lifted to him, calm, intelligent, and terrifying in their quiet certainty. "I saw the equations were wrong, sir," she said. "I needed to fix them." Webb's skepticism melted. He asked her questions, simple at first, then harder, progressing to calculus, physics, and theoretical engineering problems. Lydia solved them all. She explained her reasoning, demonstrated methods the professors had never considered. Every step revealed not memorization, but intuition, creativity, and brilliance far beyond her years. Claraara watched silently, fear and pride mingling in her chest. Webb realized that history was in his hands, and that this child could challenge everything he had ever believed about intelligence, race, and opportunity. By the end of that first meeting, Webb knew this was no ordinary prodigy. Lydia Johnson had arrived, not just to solve a problem, but to change the world, and perhaps to shatter it in the process. Boston in 1897 did not welcome anomalies. A colored girl, barely 13, outthinking the brightest minds of MIT was more than unusual. It was dangerous. Whispers traveled faster than facts in the city's academic circles. And yet, Professor Webb could not ignore what he had witnessed. Lydia Johnson was a mind that refused to be ignored. The very next day, Webb returned to MIT and began the delicate process of planning a secret education for her. Publicly, nothing could appear to happen. The trustees of the institute had already expressed concerns, half excited by the intellectual possibility, half terrified of social scandal. If the world discovered a colored child surpassing white graduates, the social order might quake. The compromise was clear: Lydia could study, but only in secret, after hours, under strict supervision, with no mention in official records. She would be a ghost, a shadow in the night, permitted to learn, but invisible to society. Claraara Johnson, Lydia's mother, agreed cautiously. Her daughter had never received formal instruction beyond what she picked up while cleaning lecture halls. She worried naturally about exploitation, about exposure, about the consequences of curiosity in a world that rarely tolerated brilliance in someone like Lydia. "If this goes wrong," she told Webb, her voice steady but eyes fearful, "I'll take her away. We'll disappear and you'll never find us again." Webb assured her he understood. Their first night of official lessons was in a quiet classroom at MIT, entered through a service door where no student or faculty could see. Webb brought a notebook, chalk, and a simple wooden desk. Lydia approached with a mixture of curiosity and discipline, as if she had been. Born knowing the rules of this strange new game, she immediately observed the blackboard, as though she could read it like Braille. Every symbol, every number, every equation appeared to her as shapes, as patterns, as a language she instinctively understood. Webb began with simple arithmetic, then moved to algebra. Lydia solved problems instantly. Geometry followed, trigonometry next. She traced the relationships between angles and curves with her eyes as if they were visible forces in space. Then came calculus, differential equations, and theoretical physics. Every time Webb presented a problem his graduate students had wrestled with for days, Lydia solved it in moments. What shocked Webb most was her reasoning. She didn't just calculate, she explained. She demonstrated methods he had never seen, visualizing abstract concepts in ways that revealed the underlying structure of reality itself. When she solved a fluid dynamics problem, she drew diagrams that captured the motion of wind and water, showing the unseen forces as tangible shapes. It was not memorization. It was understanding. It was genius. Night after night, the lessons continued. Lydia absorbed the formal language of mathematics at a pace that defied logic. Calculus in a month, differential equations in 2 weeks. She read Newton's Principia and identified errors overlooked for centuries. Webb was astounded, but he also felt the tension of danger. If word leaked, she could be taken, exploited, or dismissed. In 1897 America, brilliance alone did not grant safety. Color, gender, and circumstance determined her limits. Yet, despite these risks, Lydia thrived. Her mind consumed problems like fire consuming dry wood, leaving nothing untouched, nothing unexamined. And every night, as she packed her notebook and left the classroom through the hidden service door, she returned to her small, cold room above the tenement, carrying the weight of knowledge far beyond her years, and yet untouched by arrogance. Her mother watched, proud and fearful, knowing that the world was not ready for the mind she had nurtured. Webb, meanwhile, began to realize that he was witnessing history. Not only was Lydia rewriting what was possible in mathematics, she was rewriting the rules of who could be considered a genius. And the city of Boston, asleep in the winter frost, had no idea that a 13-year-old girl living in poverty was quietly bending the boundaries of the universe. By March of 1897, the secret of Lydia Johnson's brilliance had begun to ripple quietly through Boston's academic circles. Not publicly, of course. Any rumor could bring ruin. But among a select few professors, the whispers carried a mixture of awe and fear. Webb's colleagues who had visited the small, frost-bitten boarding house could not shake what they had witnessed, a girl of 13 solving problems that had stumped graduate students, visualizing mathematics as if it were a living, breathing entity. At MIT, the normal rhythm of lectures and laboratories went on as usual, but at night, a shadowed world opened. Lydia arrived through the service entrance, clutching a worn satchel, containing her notebooks and a small pencil stub. Each night, she faced a new challenge. Professors presented her with problems from mechanics, engineering, astronomy, and theoretical physics. And each night, Lydia astonished them. She didn't just answer, they began to depend on her insight. Webb had once thought of mathematics as a disciplined struggle between man and abstraction. Now he saw it as a dialogue, a conversation in which Lydia's mind guided the questions themselves. When he asked her to calculate the stress on a suspension bridge under variable wind conditions, she didn't immediately write numbers. Instead, she described the airflow, how it swirled and eddied, how it pressed unevenly against each cable, how the metal would bend under forces no formula had yet captured. Then she drew diagrams so precise they could be used in an actual engineering report. Outside the classroom, life remained unforgiving. Claraara still labored long nights cleaning halls and lecture rooms. Their small apartment in the South End smelled of boiled cabbage and coal smoke. Lydia often helped her mother with chores, her hands raw from scrubbing floors, yet her mind never rested. She continued observing, calculating, imagining the world as equations and forces. The poverty of her surroundings could not contain the magnitude of her intellect. Word began to slip through the cracks. Scholars who had witnessed Lydia's abilities were careful with their praise, but admiration is hard to contain. Letters crossed the city and the country, hinting at a prodigy unlike any other. Some saw her as a miracle, others as a threat. In a society obsessed with hierarchy and race, a colored girl outshining white men in mathematics unsettled more than egos. It threatened the very beliefs upon which the world was structured. Webb, aware of the danger, became a protector as much as a mentor. He had to shield Lydia from curiosity that could exploit her, and prejudice that could destroy her. Each night he taught with care, but always with caution. If anyone discovered the truth, if donors, trustees, or the public learned of a colored girl surpassing their own students, the scandal could ruin not only Lydia but the institute itself. Yet Webb could not ignore the extraordinary nature of her mind. He watched, often in silence, as she visualized forces, numbers, and equations in ways he could never have imagined. Despite the secrecy, the sessions changed both teacher and student. Webb began to question everything he thought he knew about intelligence, about who was capable of genius, and the arbitrary boundaries society imposed. Lydia, for her part, remained unshaken. She sought understanding, not recognition. Her questions were not about fame, they were about truth. How could she learn all that the world had to offer if she didn't understand the language of the universe? In those dark, cold classrooms, a revolution quietly unfolded. It was a revolution not of politics, but of the mind. Numbers became instruments of freedom, understanding became rebellion, and a 13-year-old girl who had grown up in the shadows of Boston's tenements was quietly reshaping the future. And as spring began to touch the city with hints of warmth, the professors realized that their world had shifted. Nothing would ever be the same. Lydia Johnson was no ordinary child, and the consequences of her brilliance were only beginning to unfold. The nights grew longer, and Boston's winter wind bit sharper through the narrow alleys of the South End. Lydia Johnson's mind, however, was alight with an intensity that made the cold in the cramped boarding house seem irrelevant. She no longer merely observed the world. She dissected it, measured it, reconstructed it in her mind's eye. Every shadow on the brick walls, every creaking floorboard, every flicker of gaslight became a variable in her silent calculations. The equations she had once seen only on blackboards were now everywhere. The weight of the snow bending the branches, the tension in the bridge cables over the Charles River, even the path of smoke rising from the chimneys. Professor Webb had begun to realize that Lydia's genius was not confined to mathematics alone. She approached problems as if the world itself were a puzzle, a lattice of logic waiting to be understood. One evening, as Webb handed her a complex problem in fluid dynamics, Lydia paused, her dark eyes narrowing. She traced invisible patterns above the paper with her finger, then began sketching a series of geometric spirals, arcs, and interlocking circles. Webb watched in awe as the solution unfolded before his eyes, elegant, precise, and unlike anything he or his colleagues could have imagined. "What you're doing," Webb said, his voice betraying both wonder and hesitation, "is unprecedented." "I see it," Lydia replied softly, almost apologetically. "I see how the water flows, how the wind moves, how the forces bend. I don't need books. I see it." Claraara, standing behind her daughter, could scarcely contain her pride. And yet, she worried, how would the world treat a colored girl whose mind exceeded that of the most learned men? Already, whispers from the boarding house tenants suggested that the Johnsons harbored secrets far beyond their station. Neighbors glanced sideways, children mimicked her gestures and numbers, and the cleaning women spoke in hushed tones about the miracle child. Claraara knew that curiosity could be dangerous. In a society where race and gender dictated the value of a life, Lydia's gifts were both a treasure and a peril. One particularly bitter night, as snow swept across the streets and the lamps flickered in the wind, Lydia solved a problem that had eluded MIT faculty for months, a theoretical calculation for the optimal suspension of a bridge under variable wind patterns. Webb, who had seen hundreds of students struggle and fail, was left speechless. He placed a hand on his forehead, feeling the exhaustion of a man who had spent years chasing understanding, only to witness it leap effortlessly from the mind of a 13-year-old girl. "You must be careful," he whispered. "The world isn't ready for this. Not yet." Lydia looked up, tilting her head. "Then, I will learn quietly. I will understand everything I can so that one day, when the world is ready, I can show it. I just need to know more first." The following weeks blurred into one continuous lesson. The professors who had been called in to verify her abilities became regular witnesses to her rapid ascent. She devoured advanced physics, complex calculus, and engineering concepts with a hunger that left them breathless. But with each solved equation came tension. Outside the classroom, the city held its rules. In the classrooms of MIT, she was a prodigy. In the eyes of society, she remained invisible, a shadow moving through spaces where no colored girl had any place. Claraara worried nightly. Could her daughter survive in a world determined to suppress her brilliance? Could she protect her from exploitation, from people who might see her as a tool rather than a child? Lydia, however, remained focused, unshaken in her purpose. She had glimpsed a universe of knowledge and would not be turned away. And so, the secret education continued. Nights in the empty lecture halls became a sanctuary. Chalk dust settled over her small fingers as she scribbled solutions that would astonish the world. Each correct answer, each elegant proof, was a rebellion against the limits society had imposed on her. In the shadows of Boston, hidden from all but a few witnesses, Lydia Johnson was rewriting the boundaries of possibility. Spring arrived in Boston with hesitant warmth, but for Lydia Johnson, nothing about the city had changed. Her life was still divided between the narrow streets of the South End and the secret halls of MIT, where the professors marveled at her genius and carefully recorded every discovery. Yet the world beyond those walls loomed as both threat and mystery. Each step outside reminded Claraara that society would never see Lydia as anything more than a colored girl, a curiosity, a shadow of potential they refused to recognize. Despite this, Lydia thrived. Her understanding of mathematics, physics, and engineering had grown beyond what any adult could have imagined. She devised new ways to calculate stresses and strains in complex structures, anticipated wind forces that would have floored seasoned engineers, and even began experimenting with rudimentary designs that hinted at inventions decades ahead of her time. The professors who worked with her could only watch, a mixture of awe, disbelief, and fear settling over them. Fear, not for themselves, but for what might happen if the world ever learned of Lydia's abilities. It was one evening, as the last light of day faded over the Charles River, that Professor Webb realized the true significance of Lydia's mind. She wasn't just solving problems, she was transforming them. She could see patterns where others saw only numbers, anticipate outcomes no theory had predicted, and draw solutions that seemed almost prophetic. Her gift was not merely brilliance, it was vision. And vision, in a world unwilling to acknowledge her worth, was both dangerous and revolutionary. But even as her talents flourished, Lydia remained humble. She never sought recognition, never demanded praise. To her, the equations were not tools for fame, they were windows into truth. Every solved problem, every completed proof, was a small victory against a world that had told her, from birth, that she could not belong. And then came the day when Claraara, watching from the doorway, felt both pride and terror as her daughter announced, quietly but firmly, "I will take what I learn and build something for the world, Mama. Something that cannot be ignored." Claraara understood then that this child, the small, dark-eyed girl who had once solved impossible problems on a blackboard in a deserted laboratory, would not be contained. No social convention, no prejudice, no law could hold her back. The professors, the foremen, even the trustees of MIT, who had debated her fate in hushed meetings, all became witnesses to a secret history of genius. A child born into poverty, born into a world that sought to erase her potential, was quietly rewriting what humanity thought it knew about talent, intelligence, and possibility. Lydia's story was no longer simply about mathematics. It was about courage, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of knowledge against the weight of injustice. And though history would not immediately acknowledge her, the foundation she built, the proof she devised, and the innovation she imagined would ripple forward, quietly shaping minds and discoveries in ways that could never be undone. If you are fascinated by stories like Lydia Johnson's, stories of hidden genius, forgotten brilliance, and the voices that history almost silenced, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss these incredible journeys into the past. Leave a comment telling us which hidden stories or dark historical mysteries you'd like to uncover next. Together, we will shine a light on the remarkable lives that history almost forgot, because sometimes the brightest minds are the ones the world never sees, and the lessons they leave behind are far more powerful than anyone could have imagined.